Let's smoke a brisket. In 6 minutes, I'm going to show you how to trim, season, smoke, and slice the perfect brisket. You got this. And we're going to get right into it because I know we're all short on time. We start out with our rub. I'm using a scale just to get a true sense of how much product I'm really using here. I went with 50 grams coarse ground black pepper and 25 grams each of kosher salt and seasoning salt, which includes MSG. And I couldn't find my funnel, so I went with the from scratch method, a rolled up piece of paper. It worked great. I'm curious, what's your go-to seasoning blend for a brisket? Let me know in the comments. Now once all the seasoning is layered in, give that a shake so everyone can get to know each other. And it's about 11 p.m. at this point because I find the best time to throw on a brisket is around midnight. And for knife selection, I've got a 7.5-inch flexible boning knife from Victorinox, which will be linked in the description along with some other products I use in this video. This is a 13-pound prime grade full packer brisket. It is thawed out, but I threw it in the freezer for about an hour prior to the trim to make the fat much more easier to work with. Carefully remove the vacuum sealed wrapper and pat the brisket dry with a paper towel. And at this point, I like to inspect the brisket, really see what I'm working with, and plan my attack. And for me, trimming the brisket is the most enjoyable part of this whole process. A lot of people in the comments will say, "Why are you trimming? You ruined it." But ideally, I want a 1/4 inch of fat across the entire fat cap, so every part of this brisket is enjoyable. And here we are removing some of the fat off the fat cap because it was up to 1 inch thick in some areas. And this is some really grizzly fat on this side, not a good bite. And this is probably the most conservative trim I've ever done on a brisket. Overall, I took off about 2 pounds of fat and any visible silver skin like you see here. Brisket is made up of 2 muscles, the flat, which is leaner, and the point is fattier. And I'm all finished with the fat cap, so let's flip it over and focus on the meat side. And there's just a little bit more silver skin to remove here, and then we'll focus on the overall shape. This thinner section is the flat, and down towards the end, I like to remove a little bit of that just to give this brisket a more even shape. And don't worry, I'm saving all of this trim. The fat will be rendered down for beef tallow, and I'm saving the meat to grind up for burgers or chili. And this point end is usually a lot thicker than the flat, so we're giving that whole side a few love taps to help level everything out for a more even cook. And the last step to this trim is to remove this large piece of fat called the decal, which separates the point from the flat. It's really hard fat, and personally, I don't care for it. Our trim is all dialed in, and the next step is to season. For the binder, we're using Worcestershire sauce. Say it with me, guys, Worcestershire. I'm starting out on the fat cap and layering down a heavy coat of that rub we prepared earlier. Once the fat cap is fully seasoned, we give it a flip and repeat on the meat side. I am going to be smoking this fat cap down, so this meat side is my presentation side. And once every square inch of this brisket has been well seasoned, we fire up our smoker to 225 degrees Fahrenheit and throw this brisket on. I'm using 2 meter plus temperature probes to check the temperature of the point and the flat independently. And I'm using the new Traeger Timberline XL for this brisket, and I've got to say I absolutely love this unit. We're smoking with applewood, so let's make sure that hopper's full. And one last check before some shut-eye.
The next day.
After about 8 hours and a beautiful night's sleep, this is what we're working with. The bark's coming along nicely. We're not quite ready to wrap, but I did spritz it a couple times with the 50-50 blend of apple cider vinegar and water. And we just threw on some of that fat from the trim for some smoked beef tallow. And the cooking area on this Timberline XL is insane. I've got our full packer brisket, beef tallow, and 2 racks of ribs with plenty of room to spare. We're at about the 12-hour mark now, and the brisket is temping at about 175 degrees internal in both the point and the flat, so we've got some really even cooking going. And now it's time for the wrap. I layer down a nice coat of beef tallow on my butcher paper, a little bit more on the top of the brisket, and then we wrap up our present. And I left the meter plus temperature probes in the brisket throughout the wrap, just so I could keep an eye on those internal temps. And we're looking to pull this at just under 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And once that temperature is reached, I let it rest for a couple hours, and this is the result. I took the brisket off at about 198 degrees Fahrenheit internal, and during the rest, the temperature did climb to over 200 degrees through carryover cooking. And after slicing it right down the middle, we see a perfectly cooked brisket, super juicy, very tender, and all the fat was fully rendered. And there's a few tests you can use to see how good your brisket was cooked. Here's the bend test. It was able to hold up to its own weight, and it pulls right apart. And our family was getting super hungry at this point, so I was sure to get the kids fed first, and my 10-month-old son Zane was able to enjoy this without any teeth. And now this is the point side, a much fattier muscle, and the grains do run perpendicular to the flat, so we're sure to turn it 90 degrees before slicing. This brisket turned out absolutely incredible, and I feel like I learned something new every time I cook one of these. And if you're still watching, thanks so much for making it this far. Be sure to like and comment on this video and subscribe to my channel. Here's the full spread, including collard greens, mac and cheese, and ribs. And be sure to turn on those post notifications so you don't miss these upcoming videos.